All right. Well, hey, hello, and welcome to Revolutionizing Retail, how Salesforce and Vertex empower omnichannel retailers with cutting edge solutions. I love every word in that title. And today's fascinating webinar is sponsored by Salesforce and their partner Vertex and produced by SmartBrief. My name is Jess Stenback. I'm with SmartBrief, a future B2B company, and I'm so happy that I get to be here with all of you today as your moderator, because today we're going to get into a little bit more of an interactive conversation with all of you and with our expert presenter who's here with us to help us really dig in and help us unpack the power of data management and how the right tool can help you build that personalized and efficient shopping journey that we're all trying to create these days, right? Because I think if we look at the space we're in right now, the retail world is just wild. The opportunities that we are enabling with these rapidly evolving technologies are so exciting and seemingly endless and changing all the time. But before we jump in and change everything in our operational systems and our workflows, we need to think a little strategically. We need to plan ahead. And so today we're digging into some of those key challenges that some of you might be facing in your retail space, whether you're a large and giant enterprise or a small, maybe a little startup phase, whatever you're kind of living in right now. And we're going to talk about those challenges that you might be facing, especially in data management. And then we're going to look at what solutions exist to help you. And this is the piece that I also find really helpful with this. We're going to explore how you can sort through what is the best solution. What do you need to be pursuing if you're thinking about leveling up and enhancing some of those organizational and maybe a little bit more operational flows that you've got in your organization. And this is really going to lead us into best practices. We're going to talk about some real world examples. We're going to highlight some of the exciting possibilities for personalization for your customers and how you can increase efficiency for your team. Basically, all the important things, right? All the best things. So we've got a lot to do, and I want to get our wonderful presenter on out here with me, but I'm just going to get through a few housekeeping points that will really help you get the most out of our conversation with us, because as I said, we really want this to be interactive. We want to hear from you. So speaking of which, let's take a little tour of your console, and we're going to kick things off in the chat tab. So if you haven't already done so, and I see a few of you in there, I see we've got Mac and Matt and Jose, and I thought I saw Jorge in here earlier, Samir, we've got a whole awesome crew. Keep those highs and hellos coming. Let us know where you're calling in from, first time, long time. Where are you joining us from today? How's the weather? What did you have for lunch? Whatever you feel like sharing, we want to hear from you. And then as we go through our day today, make sure that you're asking questions of our expert presenter. So here's the thing, the chat tab that we've got there, that's where we all get to interact with each other. So we're going to share stories. If you have something that resonates, something that's worked for you and your organization, something you're excited to share, that's going to go in the chat tab. If you look about two little bunny hops over to the right of that, there's the Q&A tab. That's where you can ask questions directly of our expert presenter. So we use the chat to interact, to share ideas, to get to know each other. We use the Q&A when we have those specific questions that we want to ask of our wonderful expert, who is going to take questions in real time as we go through our day together today. So keep those questions coming in. All of your thoughts and wonderings, we want those. And you're either going to post your ideas in chat or you're going to post your questions in Q&A. All right, everyone feeling good about those? Check, check, and check. We're good to go. Right in between those two tabs I was just talking to you about, there's the Docs tab. And the Docs tab is absolutely full of cool resources and takeaways, things that are really going to help you take action on what you're hearing today, because you're going to get a lot of great content from our wonderful presenter today, and you're going to want to figure out ways that you can roll that out into your organization. And the best way to do that is with some of those follow-ups, so you can read a little bit more and start to take action. So make sure you've spent some time exploring the Docs tab. All right, chat, Docs, Q&A, tick, tick, tick. We are rocking through this housekeeping. I do want to mention the closed captioning that's available for you on the console. If that would be helpful for you today, helpful in following along, please do make sure you've enabled that if you need it. Last thing I'll say about the console here, if you're having any technical issues, now I hope that doesn't come up for you today, but we all know every once in a while a little gremlin gets in the system. If somebody fed your gremlin after midnight last night and it's really causing some issues in your system, here's your first step, browser refresh. The browser refresh is going to clear out almost anything, so give that a try. Second step, you're going to try light mode. Light mode is an option that you can enable right there on your console, so give that a shot if you need it. If the browser refresh and the light mode are not working for you, don't worry, we have a bat signal signal in the sky. And that is, of course, the one and only Riley Marsh, who is here with us in the back end. So if you post in chat, Riley will be there to help you out. So if you need a hand and the first two things have not helped for you, post in chat and let Riley know that you need a little support, and she will make sure that we take care of you. All right, that's a lot of information. Let me wrap up with one last little piece of excitement, and that is our wonderful prize giveaway. We have a $250 Amazon gift card going to someone who is here live and present all the way through the webinar, maybe just a little bit lucky. So that live and present person we will announce at the end of our webinar. You do need to meet all of the Smart Brief T's and C's. If you're not sure about those terms and conditions, they are linked for you in the docs tab, so you can head on over there and check those out. All right, well, now I am going to take a big deep breath, and we're going to switch gears and get into our wonderful content, because I am so excited to introduce you to our expert presenter here with us today. And we are definitely going to get into a cool conversation with Nate Stohrer, Principal Lead Consultant at Vertex. Now, Nate Stohrer has a cool background, and we're going to talk to him about it a little bit more when he comes out here. But as the Principal Lead Consultant within Vertex's global professional services organization, he is involved in some really exciting things. He's been in Vertex for about 7 years. He's been leading implementations, especially a part of the vertical solutions practice. And the specialization there is in that industry-specific knowledge set. So looking at retail, e-commerce, and marketplaces, as well as, of course, leasing, telecommunications, and hospitality. So that's quite the arc, and that has a lot of cool things that we're going to be bringing into that conversation today. So let me stop talking about him and instead talk with him. Nate, come on down. That's your Price is Right call out. Dun, dun.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, happy to have you here, Nate. Nate, okay, first and foremost, I have to say, Nate Stohrer, fantastic name for someone in retail. Well done, sir.
Thank you. You know, it was just, I was destined to be in retail. That's all I got to say about that. My path was already set for me before I even knew it.
Written in the stars. What else could you have done by going into retail? I love it. Well, Nate, we were just chatting a little bit about you and kind of getting into your professional background. I know there's a lot more to you that we didn't get into. You've got a wonderful family. You have twins. You have 2.5-year-old twins.
Yes. They are awesome. Let me tell you. You know, you think you know what you're doing parenting, and then you get twins, and let me tell you, it's a whole new ball game.
So you have 4 kids, the second set are twins, and so nothing phases you, is what I'm taking away from that.
Well, I think everything phases me. I think you just kind of learn how to roll with it, right? You never know what you're going to get. You always got to be on your toes. That's the level of readiness that Nate is bringing to this conversation today. I love that. Okay, well, Nate, other than being the father of a whole wonderful host of little humans and having this really cool position that you're in now, talk to us a little bit more about you and kind of what brought you into your role today. Yeah, sure. So starting off my career, I was in the retail industry. So I worked for a retailer. I was based in Columbus, Ohio. That's really where I kind of learned about the industry. Fast forwarding, moving over to Vertex, retail is really where I've spent the entirety of my career in some shape or form. So supporting them from the implementation side or actually being back there. I was on the IT side of the house. So unlike a lot of my colleagues at Vertex, I don't actually come from a tax background. IT is kind of where I learned everything. This whole kind of concept of tax technology really been evolving, over the last 8 or 10 years or so, and the idea of how tax and tech kind of work together to solve these problems and these complexities that really come around the tax space. It's great. When I worked at those retailers, Vertex was one of the systems that I was responsible for, and that's where I learned the game. And I said, hey, what a cool company, what a cool concept. I want to go work for them.
I see. I love that. I felt that from you in the conversations we've had in the past, the passion that you're bringing for Vertex and for what you're enabling for folks. And we're going to talk about this later, but getting so much beyond just tax and more into what these solutions can enable for the humans involved in these organizations. And I'm really pumped up to get into that. But maybe can I ask you before I get excited and start jumping into the actual questions that I have for you, for anyone that maybe hasn't gotten to know Vertex before, could you tell us a little bit about Vertex and why you're so passionate about this organization that you're a part of?
Yeah, absolutely. So
one of the greatest things I think about working in that tax and technology space is the fact that, technology is constantly changing. You're seeing lots of movement, lots of enhancements, things like that. You always are trying to be involved in the next big thing, right? In tax is actually very similarly interesting, right? So in tax, there's a lot of change that goes on as well. Legislation changes. It happens very often. You start looking between, different states, different countries, and there's a whole lot of complexity. One of the big things that really kind of draws me to this space is the ability to be a problem solver. So, you're always out there, you're always looking for ways to do things better, do them more efficiently, to kind of bridge those gaps. And so tax and technology kind of working in combination together really gives you that ability to go out and to, have a big impact.
Well, and one of the things that, I like tax and technology working together, equaling greater impact. Today, we're here to talk about Vertex and Salesforce and the sort of supercharged impact that partnership has created as well. Can you give us a little bit of a foundational introduction to that partnership?
Yeah, sure. So the slide that we have up here on the screen kind of covers, at a high level view, right? We can never shove everything all into one slide, but this does a good job kind of explaining how we got to this point. So Vertex and Salesforce, we've been partners for over 6 years. We do have dedicated teams that work with one another to kind of enable each other as part of that tax and technology, journey that you're going through. We've got over 10 different certified integrations that go across 3 different Salesforce DC clouds. So on the left-hand side there, you can see we're referencing from the bottom up. We've got our revenue cloud, we got sales cloud, and then kind of specific to this more retail-based conversation, our commerce cloud as well. Love working with these products, love integrating them together. It really is a true partnership. And you can see we've got a quote down here at the bottom, from Amy Gorman at Salesforce. It's great, right? Vertex and Salesforce have a strong collaborative relationship. And really, I think that kind of speaks volumes to, companies that are out there. They're looking for these next solutions, trying to drive their company forward, getting tech partners that work together behind the scenes to make your lives easier. It's a huge step in the right direction. Vertex and Salesforce are already working on things, trying to give you that peace of mind, so you don't have to worry about every little nuance, because we're doing it for you, right? We are partners in this. It's not that we just integrate with one another. We really are partners as it comes to delivering these solutions.
Boy, that is an important difference, isn't it, Nate? Just not just like, oh, well, we can fit together, but to actually be a partnership
Right.
is that next level of opportunity. And I wanted to pull up this slide as well, because I think this is a really interesting sort of look at a glance to what you were just describing when we were chatting about Vertex at a high level. Is there any context you'd like to add around some of these very exciting stats?
Yeah, we get the question a lot of times, right? Who is Vertex, right? What does Vertex do? A lot of times whenever you're thinking about either your tech stack or your business processes, tax maybe isn't top of mind, right? Tax is this thing that everybody just kind of has to do. But Vertex actually has a very deep history when it comes to taxation and the movement into the technology space. So Vertex has been around for over 40 years. It actually started off by doing some like mail order catalogs. So anytime there were tax rate updates, you would actually get mailed a catalog with these updates that you could go and key into your systems. As times change, right? So do the ways that we interact with our customers. So, nowadays we are talking about real updates. We're talking about system to system communication and things like that. But we've been doing this for over 40 years. The customer base, so Vertex has over 4,000 customers globally. We do service 60% of the Fortune 500. When we talked about those pre-built integrations, right? So Vertex has over 150 different standard integrations that we work with partners to harden and to make readily available to our customers. We do support content in over 195 countries as well. So again, very deep, very broad, very rich content here. We like to tout that our content is really our biggest differentiator with a lot of our competitors. We get into a lot of those nuances and into some of those complexities that I think we're going to talk about today, especially as it comes to things like retail and omnichannel.
Yes, that is Well, perfect segue, Nate. That's exactly where I want to go. I think now that we've gotten to know Vertex a little bit, we've kind of been introduced to the Vertex Salesforce partnership, and I'm excited to dive in a little bit further as we kind of go through this. But I think an important place to start is with the complexities that you're addressing. You've mentioned a few times things like the evolving state of tax, and I think of technology as well. And so obviously things are moving very quickly. And I think, and there's something that I just wanted to flag for the audience out there. Probably if you've joined today, you have an interest in the tax side of things, probably. But if not, if you're joining because you're like, oh God, I have to, I just don't like our tax system is so bulky and we just have to do this. If we can challenge you to sort of ignite the human side of this and to think about if your taxes are functioning, if your tax systems are functioning smoothly, quickly, efficiently, what is that going to open up for your team once that's sort of taken care of and that's not something you have to stress about? And there's some real opportunity here that Nate is going to unpack for us. So let's dive in. Let's get into it. I'm pumped up. Nate, let's start with the challenges. Let's start with the difficulties. Why is tax so hard? What are all the complexities and state by state and industry by industry variations that we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, so tax for anybody doing business in North America, it's a huge headache, right? Just with the way that taxes are kind of structured, the way that the legislation works, no two states do things the exact same way. So, the bigger your footprint, the larger area that you're doing business in, the more complex that environment is going to be. There's just a huge volume of changes that go through that we don't see elsewhere in the world. That type of information is something that we have to stay on top of. And when you start talking about that manual component and the touch points that the customers have, there's really a lot in the tax space that has to be maintained. It could be some little parish in the middle of a state somewhere that is changing their tax rules, or it could be, the entire state is changing the way that they're doing their tax rules. And so the impact that it has to your business and the impact that it has to your operations, it could be lots of changes happening very quickly, or it could be big changes that have a large impact to your bottom line if things don't go correctly. If you're doing a lot of business in a given jurisdiction or a given state, and you have the tax set up wrong, maybe you weren't aware that the tax rate was changing, that could result in a lot of fees and fines down the lines during audit. So North America, especially, just because of the way that the jurisdictions and the laws are written, hugely complex environment.
Yeah, hugely complex and lots of considerations and the consequences are not low either. So it's really important to get right. If we're thinking about some of and you've mentioned this a few times, and I said I really like that kind of tools and tech that you were talking about that integration there. Is technology always the answer, or enhanced technology always the answer? Or is there, maybe for some of the folks out there in the audience that are coming from smaller organizations, maybe they're kind of thinking, hey, my manual processes work fine here. What would you say to those folks?
Yeah, I mean, your technology stack is definitely going to make the ease of maintenance, it'll make things easier the more up to date you are, right? And a lot of companies are facing the point where they've got this either outdated technology or they've got such manual processes in place that trying to take on something like, implementing a tax system, it's this huge undertaking, not just from the standpoint of, yes, we're getting new systems, we've got to integrate new systems and things like that, but because they have to change their business processes as well. The real struggle, I think, though, with those manual processes is that you're prone to error, right? What happens if somebody is out on leave, or what happens if somebody's computer is down for a couple of hours? Maybe they're accidentally drop it in the lake. Maybe they're on vacation. All of a sudden, they can't get to their machines to be making these updates, right? What happens in those situations? So we start talking about things like integrated systems, trying to break down silos, sharing information, making sure that the systems can talk to each other efficiently. There's certainly certain sizes of organizations where I think manual processes kind of fit the bill, but I think what everybody is eventually finding, and what everyone, I guess, is hoping for as well, is that you're going to continue to grow, right? Your company is going to get bigger and bigger, and eventually you're going to outgrow those manual processes. So you have to start looking for the systems that are designed to meet you not only where you're at today, but are also able to grow with you as you kind of move forward. And that's really, I think, one of the places where Vertex and Salesforce do a great job, right? We start talking about the different products, the different systems. There's a combination that's kind of right out there for everybody. The idea around retailers and really kind of pushing forward, wanting to grow, wanting to increase sales, right? That's really, it's based on your differentiators, right? You want to be different than your competitor. You want to be the place that customers think of whenever they want to make a purchase, right? So how do you do that? A lot of the touch points that we have now in the industry are really done through digital channels, right? Everybody's got a computer in their pocket. You want to make sure that you can reach that customer no matter where they're at. So, kind of putting together a tech stack that is able to support, multi-channel retail, making sure that you're able to meet the customer wherever they want to be met, whether it's through more of a traditional brick and mortar channel, through e-commerce or some type of omni-channel. You want to make sure that you're ready, because if you're not, then those are just going to be lost sales.
Yeah, and there's a lot of organizations now do have these sort of hybrid models of e-commerce and brick and mortar and hitting that omni-channel. And so really needing to sort of account for, if that's not where you're at now, where are you growing to? I really like that reminder, Nate. I think that future proofing, that thinking with a scalable mindset is so important. And one of them maybe being, do you think it's more common that people, that organizations have like one person who owns all this information, or that they have sort of a team of people, or that this is kind of forgotten and it's off the side of someone's desk?
No, I mean, if it's off to the side of somebody's desk, I think that there are some bigger problems we maybe need to talk about. But there's usually a team involved, right? And traditionally, that's been something that's probably fallen onto the accounting or the finance department. Maybe you've got an organization that does have dedicated either direct or indirect tax folks that are responsible for all of those rate updates and tracking those changes and things like that. By finding a tax technology partner like Vertex, you're able to free up those resources so that they're not just spending time keeping the lights on. We start talking about all of the different rate changes and things like that are happening. Today in your organization, it's possible that is the result of one person or a small team of people to making sure that those updates get pushed out. And that's really not the position that you want to be in, right? You want to make sure that something like that can be automated. You're not putting these manual points in there that somebody all of a sudden again is unavailable, or they key something in wrong and now taxes just exploded. We want to make sure that there's lots of folks with eyes on these changes, because it does have a very big impact. And as we're seeing the increase in kind of that tax technology space, it's no longer just those finance departments. We're also seeing IT organizations becoming part of that, right? Tax is integrated to so many different platforms. Your customer facing side that we were talking about today with retail, but also internally, right? Your organization is purchasing products and performing services and things like that to just keep the business running. So, there's really tax at all steps of, running your business.
And that's interesting, because we're hitting on what's that old cliche of the only thing certain is death and taxes.
Exactly. Yep. We use that one a lot.
I'm sure you've said that a number of times. Also, I was thinking of this earlier. Nate, that example of the computer falling in the lake felt very specific. So I feel like there's a story there.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a laptop, but it may have been a phone at some point. Not going to point fingers or anything, but sometimes with kids, things get a little crazy, especially around the water.
It gets a little crazy. You don't know.
Yep.
Yeah, it can happen. I have a friend who works in IT for a company, and I won't say which one. And he got a phone that someone gave him the other day, a company phone that they had put in the microwave, because they put their coffee in the microwave with their phone, and then started it, microwave their phone, and then brought it to him and was like, "Hey, can you fix this?" And he was like, "Absolutely not."
Probably the first cup of coffee of the day, it sounds like. Maybe not quite awake yet, but.
Exactly. Okay. So when we're thinking about tax is something that, regardless of industry or size of organization, you need to be thinking about this. Obviously, you're thinking in slightly different scales, or in slightly different, maybe some nuance to compliance. And that's kind of what I'd love to ask you for your opinion before we get into. We're going to move into some solutions for anyone that's sort of feeling like, oh, there's so many challenges. We're going to get into some great solutions here. But talk to me a little bit about
for the folks here in our audience that might be coming from a variety of different industries or size organization, what are the kind of high level complexities or variations that they need to have in mind?
Yeah, sure. So, when we talk about retail, I think it's important we kind of define what retail looks like, because doing this and talking to a wide array of companies, sometimes retail means different things to different people. So
Yeah.
when we're talking about retail today, we're talking about not just the traditional like brick and mortar channels, but this would also encompass things like e-commerce transactions or marketplaces, kind of any of those places that you are selling to your customer. And then we'll kind of get into that evolution of, okay, we've also got omnichannel, where we're kind of mixing what those channels look like and how they interact with each other. So when we're kind of saying retail, we're talking about all those things kind of as a whole here. And retail in those capacities are very different than other industries, right? You've got, telecommunications, I do some work in, as well as the leasing spaces. And there's tax laws and nuances to each of them that make them kind of unique. Right. So when we talk about our retailers specifically, we had a very big change that happened just a couple of years back. Well, I guess it was a few more than a couple at this point, but 2018, right? We had this decision come out, South Dakota versus Wayfair. It kind of reset a lot of the expectations when it came to e-commerce transactions, right? So as the natural progression of things goes, a lot of retailers start off in the brick and mortar space. And then you kind of get into the 90s, you can get this .com boom and everybody's moving and we need a website, right? I have to be able to sell online. Phone or catalog ordering is no longer the only ways of interacting with our customers. And so this decision happens in 2018 that basically says, hey, everybody, you now have a lot more responsibilities for collecting and remitting these taxes for these remote sales, right? You may not have physical stores or brick and mortar locations inside our state, but now you're required to be collecting and filing those taxes. So there's this big change that happens around that 2018 timeframe that really hit the retail industry hard. And when we start talking about level setting, right? Everything that the tax was doing before 2018 happened and everything that they're still required to do, even with these added complexities, you've got within the retail industry these different verticals that already have kind of unique operational aspects that impact their taxation. So we talk about like food and beverage companies, right? So food and beverage companies have to deal with things like meals taxes or beverage container deposits or recycling fees, as they'll sometimes be referred to. They've got to get correct taxation whenever you walk up to the food counter and you say, is that for here to go, right? Your answer could actually impact the taxation of your foods. On top of that, we've seen things come to light around sugar or junk food taxes. There's always been a lot of taxes around alcohol. So, within the food and beverage industry, there's all of this tax complexity now kind of layering on top of this, shift in the industry towards the e-commerce and the digital fulfillment channels as well. Hanging goods retailers are no different. So, we talk about clothing, footwear, those types of retailers. We have bag fees. That's a big one, right? How do I manage this, the states and the cities that are coming out and saying, we don't want you giving out disposable bags, right? That's increasing the litter and increasing the environmental impact, right? So we're going to charge you anytime you go ahead and give customers these bags. There's certain location-based fees as well. So if you do business in certain outlet malls or things like that, you've got additional fees tacked onto those. A lot of those are also relevant to like our big box stores, but they've also got different things like retail delivery fees, right? So if I'm using the public roadways, now Colorado and Minnesota are out there saying, you know what, you may not have stores out here, but you know what, to deliver your products, you got to help pay for that infrastructure. More and more companies too are looking to go towards their marketplaces and try to find new ways of reaching new customers. So instead of going directly to your website, maybe you are on a third-party marketplace and you're a seller on there. Trying to find the balance between what control are we willing to give up, right, as part of being able to draw in those new customers through that platform, right? The buying experience is no longer yours on the marketplace because it's the marketplace's platform, but in order to increase sales, where's that trade-off kind of come from? But tax legislators said, you know what, there's a new opportunity there to go ahead and start collecting more taxes, right? We've got these marketplace facilitator laws where sometimes the platform is responsible for collecting and remitting these taxes, and in other cases, the marketplace has to give them back to you, and you as a retailer, as a seller on those marketplaces, are responsible for that as well. So there's all this complexity. There's changes that are happening from a legislative perspective. Retail again has a lot in terms of what you need to deal with on a day-to-day basis. In doing so, right, I want to call attention to the fact that there is a cost of compliance. So we talk about all these different taxes, and we talk about all the different ways that your systems could be talking to one another, that you could be meeting your customers to transact. But in order to do tax correctly, in order to be able to correctly calculate, collect, and remit those taxes, you have to be in a place where your systems can handle it, where your business processes are able to handle it, and really where your tax filing and your data is able to support you across that journey. So the cost of compliance is something that we always talk about in our implementations, because it comes down to, how exact or how precise can we actually be in doing this? Some of our systems may have inherent shortfalls, and so we may not be able to comply in those situations. But being able to identify them ahead of time, being able to put some processes around there to understand what the impact is of not being able to adhere to those requirements, or what is the cost of putting in a new system that can do it, right? Those are all decisions that go back to the leaders in the business that are making the decisions about where do we move forward, how do we handle where we're at, because again, everybody in here is hoping to grow that bottom line. So if you're able to make additional sales, but all of a sudden you've got these fees and fines coming back because you didn't do tax correctly, that's going to cut away from your margins.
Yeah, much more worthwhile to invest that early on, and the importance of the ability to make change. I was thinking about this. Your team actually introduced me when you said the to go or here to go. I had no idea that affected tax or
Yep.
could affect tax. That's wild. Your team was telling me about like certain kinds of candy bars that
Yeah,
like
that's
some of them
another
are
one.
considered food and some are candy or something.
You actually have to get down to the level of looking at the ingredients list. So in some cases, the candy that contains flour is taxed differently. So if it's got a little wafer or something like that in there, candy that contains flour can be taxed differently than other types of candy, a straight chocolate bar or something like that. There's all these nuances that prior to getting involved with Vertex directly, I had no idea existed, right? Tax is a crazy space, and there's a lot of problems to be solved there.
It's crazy, and there is, and in I live in Canada, and our province here had an issue, or not an issue. They did a nice thing where they took away sales tax leading up into the Christmas months to kind of help folks out in the province, and that sounds fabulous, and it was. I mean, hey, I loved getting cheaper coffee; that was great, but it was only on specific items, and
Yep.
so for an organization that has more than just one item that they sell, they all had to go in and manually change all of their tax settings by SKU for 2 months and then change it back. Now, if you have a larger organization that has either a team that's doing this or a technology solution that's taking care of it, great. But I talked to some small business owners that were really struggling to keep up with this government mandated change that came out like that, and then was there for a short time and went away.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and throw up a slide here.
Yeah.
So we talk about some of those complexities. So one of the things I have on here under that product master data section is sales tax holidays. So exactly like you're talking about here, we talk about rate changes, and you say, okay, well, state comes out, says we're going to change the tax rate from 5 to 6%, whatever that may be. Usually that's known well ahead of time, and hopefully there's some lead time there. But these sales tax holidays are something that hit the retail industry very hard. Sales tax holidays are usually those short periods of time where you change the rate. So in the sake here that we talk about the Canadian example, right? So yes, you're absolutely correct. Canada came out and said for certain types of products, if you purchase between these dates, the tax rate's going to be reduced, or we're going to drop it to zero. Great for the consumers, but talk about a fire drill, right? As an organization that's dealing with these manual processes and having to go out there and say, does the website work correctly? Are we ready for this, right? Does my store in province A versus province B versus province C, are all of those tax rates set up correctly, right? Not to mention, how many locations do I have within those provinces, right? So, you could have 50, 100, 200, a couple of customers that I talked to, they've got, thousands of stores. that reside in these jurisdictions, right? How do you go out and how do you push those updates and ensure they're being done correctly when you've got to have hands-on keyboards? Somebody's got to go out there and make those changes, right? Automating those types of updates and being able to have a tax partner that pushes that content for you. I'm sure those folks had a lot better couple of weeks than the ones doing it manually.
Much better, much smoother Christmas. But and that's, I think it's part of, with the right tools, this could be a very fun puzzle, right?
Like it's a great puzzle. It's one that we talk about all the time. Like, with the broader category I put up here on the screen, right? When we talk about sales tax holidays, and it comes down to your product data, right? So how well am I identifying that what I'm selling is a candy bar versus a candy bar with flour? Maybe it's a t-shirt, maybe it's not, maybe it's safety equipment, whatever it may be, having enough information about your products to be able to tell the tax system, I need the tax rules for flour with candy, or I'm sorry, candy with flour, as opposed to candy without flour. I mean, you've got to have the data to support that. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to comply with it. And so when we start looking at that master data, it's one of the key pieces of our implementations that we spend a lot of time on. A lot of times whenever you look at the master data, it has to deal with the merchandising or the buying process. It's not necessarily something that folks think about as being tax centric. Now, we do have some organizations that say, you know what, our product hierarchy is great, and that's what we're going to use to drive tax. And sometimes that works, but other times you start talking about things like, we've got these categories for other or for seasonal, right? How do I have any idea what that means from a tax perspective? So kind of taking that opportunity whenever you're going through and maybe you're, changing your e-commerce platform to Salesforce, or maybe you're looking for a tax specific implementation to put in a new tax engine. Maybe you're automating tax for the first time. Using those as opportunities to go back and help to make the overall end-to-end process easier is something that I would highly recommend. And again, we do spend a lot of time talking about this when it comes to the implementations that we work on. It just makes at the end of the day, if you spend the time during the project and set it up correctly, you don't have to panic whenever, we wait till the 11th hour to come up and say, hey, this sales tax holiday, it's actually happening starting on Monday. Hope everybody's able to comply with that, right? The more automated, the more seamless your data is, the more systems that are integrated to it, right? So we talk about point of sale and e-commerce most of the time. So are those getting their product master data from the same system? Sometimes we run into companies that say, you know what, our e-com platform has its own set of data over here and the point of sale has it over here. Did we update both systems? What happens whenever we have products that are only in one and not the other? Did we remember to update those? Really kind of getting that integration, removing the silos of data. Again, it's going to make your jobs easier in the end.
Well, let's get into that side a little bit, and I want to start nudging us a little towards solutions for these as well. But you're hitting in that omni-channel direction. So if we're thinking about those complexities around omni-channel, what are they? And then let's go towards the positive side of things. Nate, what solutions do we have to all these complexities?
Right. I hope we're doing a good job at scaring everybody right now into thinking that this is, the biggest thing that's happening right now on Earth. So, no. So the retail industry, again, it's a very fun place to be because of a lot of these complexities. But it's important to note that you're not the only one that is experiencing them, right? So having tech partners that are used to dealing with these things, you've got implementers that are out there. They've worked with multiple companies before that are doing the same types of things that you're doing. Being able to draw on that knowledge is great, and having the solutions and the products to be able to support you and your size of business and the way that you operate is also key to that. So when we talk about things like the product master data, or to be ready to move and expand your footprint, whether that's globally or whether that's just into a couple of new states, depending on the size of your organization, there's a lot of things out there to kind of help with that. When we're talking about the ability to manage your product mix and your catalog and things like that, a lot of things that kind of fall by the wayside that folks don't really think about is where am I selling this product and what kind of impact does that have on our assortment? So as a company that's maybe looking to move globally, what happens whenever you start selling in both the northern and the southern hemisphere, right? In the middle of June, you've got your summer mix out there, and guess what? People want winter coats if they're south of the equator, right? You're probably not going to do that great of sales if you're not, focusing your product catalog and things like that on where your customer's at. So dealing with that, dealing with the size of your taxability landscape as you kind of move again, just because you know how something is taxed today in one state, doesn't mean it works the same in another state, or even that it'll be the same tomorrow, right? We talked about all those tax rate changes that are happening. So really trying to embed those into your business processes and think about some of those things that maybe you didn't have to deal with yesterday. Another big piece of that is really around kind of data privacy, the cloud. Everybody likes to talk about the cloud. I always say the cloud is just somebody else's computer, right? So it may not be yours or in your data center, but guess what? That information is sitting somewhere on a server. So, data privacy laws are a big thing, especially when you start looking over into the European Union, moving outside of the US and North America. Making sure that you understand what impact that has. Are you able to use a cloud-based system? What information are you storing there? That's something to think about. And edge computing is one of the ways that we see that really kind of navigated, the ability to kind of keep information locally, but not having to maintain all of these separate instances is one of the big things that customers that are first moving internationally really have to kind of get under control. And I talked about, again, kind of that ability to manage the product mix, languages. So maybe, in Canada is a great example. Once we have, North American retailers that are in the US and move into Canada, you better be able to put French on all of your Quebec sales, and that has to come first, right? So, are you ready to deal with multiple languages on your websites, things like that, as well as price and currency, of course.
Yes, important differentiators. That's a real. I think beer causes a lot of problems with repackaging and having the French. Also, I have to say, I lived in the Great North in Yukon for a summer, and the Canadian Tire there had the same purchasing order at this time. This was a long time ago, for their Yukon stores as for their southern stores. And every year they sold out of bug spray. You could not get bug spray because it's Yukon. They've so many mosquitoes, unbelievable amounts of mosquitoes. And so there was no ability to adjust what they needed based on these regions. And I remember that being a real issue. Anyways, continue my mosquito story aside.
No, that's great. So I'm going to throw one last set of complexities at you before we talk about how we're going to solve them, right? So traditional retailers, we've talked about brick and mortar, we've talked about e-commerce, right? Omnichannel adds another set of complexities. So you've got now not just two different flavors of transaction, right? You've now got mixes between those. You've got buy online, pick up in store. You've got ship from store. You've got order in store, or, send sales, endless aisle, that kind of concept, right? When you start getting into some of those complexities, it also impacts the taxation. So it's important to kind of note again that as you're looking to expand and trying to meet your customers where they're at, did you think about the tax implications of those? So a lot of the things that we talked about from a tax perspective, they're going to change depending upon, where your order is being placed, or where you fulfill it from, or where your customer is actually taking possession. And the combination of those is ultimately what drives that decision. It also makes things like inventory tracking a lot more difficult. So, are you exposing your in-store inventory to your e-commerce channel, right? So buy online and ship from store, for example. I may know that I've got inventory of something, but I don't know where that's located, right? So how do I deal with that from a fulfillment perspective? Is this really cost effective to ship something from Yukon to Florida? Right? I only had one item in my inventory, and you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sell it to that customer in South Florida, right? They need bug spray too. So, just kind of something that again, it falls by the wayside. Not everybody thinks about it. You also start seeing the additional selling channels around things like pop-up locations. So I've been talking to a lot of retailers recently that are going to music festivals. And so they say, you know what, we're in the middle of this big field somewhere. It doesn't have a great address. How am I supposed to tax these items that I'm selling at this festival? You've also got things like food trucks or mobile stores that maybe drive from location to location. They may be in 2 or 3 different places in the same day. So making sure that you're able to update the tax rates and not just use a single tax rate depending upon where that is located at a given point. We talked about marketplaces. I also want to talk about social selling. So we start seeing retailers going and saying, you know what, all the social platforms that are out there, we've got a presence out there. Our social media team does a great job at making us known. Let's start selling and putting our brand out there through those platforms as well. That is another new channel that we're starting to see. You've got things like influencers, other folks that are kind of being pulled into that marketing branch that are really out there helping drive those products. So just kind of making sure, again, that that's another platform that you're going to have to integrate into your systems.
Okay, lots to think about, and now solutions.
So let's fix everything that we just talked about, right? We're gonna solve world hunger for you right now. All right.
Fantastic.
So when we start talking about the differentiators when it comes to Vertex, right? So a couple of the things that make us different than our competitors, we start talking about our delivery model. So when it comes to this tax engine and this tax platform that you're using, we do offer different ways of meeting you where your company is at. So we have on-premise deployment options. So if you are maybe in the financials or the healthcare industry, a lot of times those folks are needing to keep their data very private. They have very strict security standards. They're only open to hosting things within their own data centers. There is no cloud for them. We have solutions that are able to be deployed behind your company firewall, not a problem. We've also got on-demand or software as a service offerings. So those folks that are looking to be cloud first, you can go out there, we can host the software on your behalf. We've got a couple different offerings in that space, depending upon the size of business and the complexities that you need solved for. And we do also have edge computing solutions. So kind of the best of both worlds. Maybe you're using our hosted platform to set up your taxes and things like that, but maybe you have a system that is behind the company firewall. Maybe you're not able to go out to the internet and start talking to the systems that are hosted out there and to be passing customer information. So using those edge computing solutions, being able to deploy a tax engine within your own network, but have it be a direct copy of what you have out there in the cloud, that's something that we're seeing a huge uptick in our customers wanting to take on as well. We also talked about the pre-built integrations. So we do have those tax links or those connectors like we talked about to help get you up and running more quickly. They're also industry hardened API designs, right? These aren't something that are being built just for your organization. Other companies are out there, they are using them, they are live. We've taken that feedback and we maintain them like they're commercial software. So any sort of updates or patching that needs to be done, we manage that on your behalf. Those updates get pushed to you. You don't necessarily need a dedicated development team to be going out there and trying to modify those integrations based on the latest standards or the latest changes in tax law. We're doing that for you as part of that licensing. And again, it also allows you to really get up and running very quickly. So, all of a sudden Canada says, hey, we're having the sales tax holiday next week, you better be ready for it. Well, speed to market, having that pre-built integration, it's already been tested, it's being used by other customers that are out there, really allows you to pivot very quickly and to get up and running with minimal overhead when it comes to new implementations. And lastly, again, that industry-leading global content that we touched on earlier as well, making sure, again, our content is the best in the industry. We're very proud of that. We've got organizations within Vertex that are responsible for managing that and updating that content on your behalf. If you're using one of our hosted platforms, we actually maintain that for you. You don't have to apply those updates, but we do still deliver, albeit via digital files, not through catalog anymore, the rate updates as well if you are an on-premise customer. So Vertex is, again, really trying to meet you with where you're at.
Yeah, I love that. Nate, Nate, I was just going to ask if we could get into some of the how now, but it sounds like that's where you're going.
That is exactly where I'm going. So
see, I knew it's like.
There you go. So with that, let's talk about what some of these solutions look like for our retailers. Everything that I'm about to share with you is a deployment model or something that I have worked with personally, as well as other folks at Vertex. So again, these are very common. There are multiple retailers using all of these options. And you can see, again, how this may play into your organization, especially whenever we're talking about that kind of omnichannel or multi-channel selling. We've got a little bit of everything in here. So the three main retail deployment options that we're going to talk about are the central office model, the in-store model, and the data distribution model. So with that, the central office model. So this is where we're talking about using a web service integration. So your system that is needing tax is going to go ahead and it's going to make a call directly to the Vertex system. So think about this again. Maybe you've got your Salesforce, your e-commerce platform that you've stood up. We need tax on Salesforce. Let's go ahead and integrate that directly to Vertex using one of those pre-built connectors. So out here, what you would end up seeing then, as far as that goes, is your website or the individual customers that are coming through your platform, or maybe inside your stores if you're a brick and mortar retailer on your point of sale. They're going to call back to that O Series application where, again, maybe we're centrally managing those tax rate updates through our hosted platforms. This is giving you real-time tax calculations, real-time determination, really kind of the best of breed whenever it comes to the ability to calculate tax. From there, we've also got what we would call like an in-store or kind of behind-the-scenes deployment model. We're referencing these using our Vertex Edge product. For those that are maybe unaware, Vertex Edge is actually a containerized application. You're able to take our tax engine and deploy it very closely to the systems that need it, taking advantage of some of those edge computing principles that we touched on. So what we have then up here is showing, again, that green box at the top is your O Series instance, and we're actually taking a copy of that configuration. So you're centrally managing, what your tax liability looks like, what products you have, and you're taking a copy and then putting it right next to that system that needs it. So whether that's your e-commerce platform, maybe again, you're deploying this in your own data centers, or even directly on the point of sale. That's something that you could go ahead and you could deploy that local tax engine and to be able to calculate tax real time right on the point of sale itself or on a back of store server. There's not really a need then to worry about what happens if my store goes offline or if I lose connectivity. All of that is kind of baked right into this solution. We've also got our data distribution model. So we've kind of talked about some of the tech that maybe is kind of in need of a refresh, or maybe our organization isn't there yet. Maybe you've got hundreds of different stores and you've got multiple point of sale devices in there. You're not quite ready to kind of make that jump or that tech investment there. We've also got what we call a data distribution model. So in the data distribution model, we're actually taking the rate and rule content that's being managed and updated by Vertex and by your tax teams in your specific company's configuration, and we're exporting that out and making it available in the native system. So again, that point of sale device, it was designed to do a lot of things. Tax just happens to be one of them. So you can use that Vertex rate and rule content to go ahead and update the point of sale and use the point of sale still as your calculation engine to be referencing the Vertex rates and rules. The last piece of this then I want to talk about is really that full circle view. So a lot of what we talked about today was really on kind of that front end perspective. So you're on the website, you are in the store, you are calculating tax, but it's important to note that Vertex also has full end-to-end solutions. And when we start talking about tax compliance and posting transaction data back into your Vertex application, that's also something that we support. So the web services are actually able to do that in real time. So as you're finalizing transactions and moving through there, the web services will record that information into Vertex to support that filing and filing and compliance operation. But what happens whenever we have systems that aren't directly integrated? Maybe we're using that data distribution model on the point of sale. We're not talking to Vertex directly. We've also got this batch client interface that allows you to load that transaction data back in, giving you that complete view of all your sales from across your channels, whether it's through the web service integrations, whether it's through a separate integration. You're able to kind of get that holistic view and to ensure then that from a compliance perspective, all your data is in one place. You've got one source of truth for that information.
This is so cool, Nate. And I'm looking, okay, so I want to play this little game with you. We didn't plan this, so this is unscripted. Okay, I'm going to show you each one. We're off book. I'm going to show you each one of the solutions that you just named and give me like a headline for each. So central office deployment model, headline.
Central office deployment. So you are well connected and you've got your systems ready to go and you are up to date as far as your current technologies and the ability to use your web services. This is the way to go. This is going to get you to market the quickest.
That was an amazing headline. Okay, we're doing this again. In-store deployment model.
Name of the game is resiliency. So again, you don't want to have to rely on an external calculation. What happens if somebody runs into the telephone pole in the parking lot and your store falls offline? This guarantees that you're able to continue to take sales. You're able to accurately calculate tax for every transaction.
Love it. Okay, nailing this. Data distribution model.
So this is where maybe you've got those systems that are out there that haven't been updated for a little while. Maybe you're using Vertex for some other reasons, but you don't want to have to separately maintain this, right? We want to remove those manual processes that we talked about. Somebody calling up at the 11th hour to say, change the tax rates within this province because the tax laws are changing. data distribution model allows us to be able to use that Vertex content and the Vertex provided updates to automate that end-to-end flow so that we can free up your resources to do other value add activities and not just spend time keying tax rates into the machines.
All right, and grand finale, drum rolling here, posting transactions to journal.
Yep, single source of truth. Again, you don't want to have to go to 5 different systems to get all of your transaction data. That's going to slow down your compliance processes and how long it takes you to file those returns. By getting all your information into one system, being able to use the batch client interface as well as those web services, Vertex is where you need to go for your transaction data. That's where you're going to go, and all of the reconciliation processes are going to go against that system.
That was a fantastic recap, Nate. You are excellent at this lightning round game. I'm going to ask you to actually do the same thing for the entire presentation. If you had to give us, if you were sort of going back over the last hour, which by the way, I cannot believe how fast this hour has gone by.
We're already through here, aren't we? Yep.
We're right at the end of time here. If you had to do sort of like a final thought, a recap from the conversation that we've had, what would you want the audience out there to walk away really kind of thinking about, mulling over, or taking action on?
Sure. No two retailers are the same. I think that's kind of the whole point of the retail industry, right? Is to try to be on the cutting edge, to try to be one-upping your competitor and being front of mind with your customers. So really what that means is that you've got to be on the latest and the greatest technology. You've got to make sure that your data is well integrated, that you don't have these information silos. Your business processes are built around automation. And really technology is kind of the way to go to enable you to free up your time, removing the manual touch points from your day-to-day operations. So when you find software partners that are already working together, that are kind of doing the work behind the scenes to make sure that the systems talk to each other correctly, that they're ready to go whenever you need them, and that you've got multiple options really when it comes to your size of business, the type of industry that you're in, maybe where you're doing business in terms of, the couple of states or internationally, whatever it may be. When you've got software partners that are already thinking about those things for you, when you've got implementation partners that have done this for other customers that are very similar to yours and bringing those best practices and those lessons learned to your implementation or to your project, right? You're setting yourself up for success. One of the key things really that I want everyone to take away from this is that don't underestimate the power of those partnerships, both with your software providers, between your software providers, as well as with your implementers, because really they're what are going to help make your project a success for your organization. And I think that's really demonstrated very well here between the way that Vertex and Salesforce have kind of committed to that partnership and have built out the integrations with one another.
And we've got an opportunity to learn a little bit more about, we've obviously gotten a great intro here, but there's always so much. We're just scratching the surface in this conversation. So we've got this QR code here, and folks in the audience can spend a little bit more time digging in. Can you tell us a little bit more about what they're going to find when they scan the QR code, when they go to that resource page? And then I'm going to throw a bonus question on that one, Nate. What else should they be doing to get started? Is that the next step, or what do they do to follow up and take action?
Yeah, so the QR code is going to be a great start here for you. So this is going to kind of take you to that partner page that we were talking about with Vertex and Salesforce. Definitely before you're leaving the platform today, go into those docs, make sure that you grab the information from there as well. A lot of great information out there. Whenever it comes to the next steps and things like that, we've got contact us information that's out there. Those of you that were active in the chat today, I know that we've got some folks out there that are monitoring the chat as well. Maybe you're already a Vertex or a Salesforce customer. You want more information about some of the stuff you heard today. Talk to your reps, right? Go out there and talk to the folks that you're already engaged with at our organizations. If you're brand new, definitely hit that link there and let us know that you were interested in what you heard today. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Well, we did get a lot of questions, and the good news and bad news with the questions. The bad news is we didn't get to as many in a Q&A as we wanted to at the end because we ran out of time. The good news is you actually answered quite a few of the questions coming in as we went through, and I think we were able to hit on what was really resonating with folks in the audience. And also, if we didn't get back to you, either with Nate kind of going through a lot of information here or in the live chat responses back, then we are going to make sure that your questions get sent to
to the Vertex team. So you are going to get responses back. So that also means if you have a question that's been rattling away in your brain, now is the time. So get that into the Q&A and we'll make sure that you get an answer. Nate, I wish we didn't have to leave things there, but I think that's where we'll wrap up for now, and then we'll just have to have you back because there's lots more to dig into here.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for having me out here. I thought this was a great session.
Yeah, me too. Really fun conversation, Nate. Hope to see you again soon.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
All right, and so like I said, make sure you are getting in your last questions into the Q&A. You can also, if you're looking to learn a little bit more right away and you haven't already scanned the QR code, well, hey, just do that right now. Get it done. Do that. But you can also visit the Docs tab. There's a couple of really great takeaways for you there, and there's a couple of really fun, kind of easy, visually sort of reads. One from Manufacturing Insider, one from Retail Industry Insider. They're really going to get into a little bit greater detail in what we were just kind of chatting about, how Vertex can really tackle those challenges in the manufacturing industry. So things like manual processes, audit risk, supporting that business growth that we were talking about with Nate. And then also we've got that retail view. So how you can automate the international tax calculations. And Nate was kind of talking about that complexity there, as well as supporting that omni-channel sales and making sure that you are compliant. So that's a big thing. So a couple of cool takeaways for you there. If you're a little bit more of that visual and audio storyteller, there's also a 2-minute video, really quick, easy watch, really fun, and lots of good information in there. So make sure you've got that. And then you can check out the solution paper on this whole wonderful partnership between Vertex and Salesforce, and kind of explore that a little bit more. Like I said, these are great resources to kind of open those tabs now, download those, hold on to them, because as much as you think you're going to remember everything that Nate said, all the wonderful insight we got today, you're gonna lose some of it as you walk away. So grab those resources, and that helps you retain that information and also share with other members of your team. So if you need to bring some of this to a decision maker in your team, this is a great way to make sure you have the tools at your fingertips. So make sure you've got those docs. All right, while you're doing all of that, Riley's also going to open up a survey. So if you haven't had a chance to fill out that survey, please do. We would love to hear from you. We want to know if we're hitting you with the right info at the right time. So make sure you fill that out. Last little bit of excitement in our final minute here. We have a $250 Amazon gift card that we will be giving away to someone who is live and present here with us at the webinar. And that special someone is Juan Ceja from Utah. Juan Ceja from Utah, congratulations to you. Now, as always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after we wrap up our webinar, so stay tuned for that. All right, my friends. Well, with that, we're going to start to bring things to a close here. I want to send a big thank you on behalf of the Smart Brief team to Salesforce and to Vertex for making this event possible, especially to Nate for such an interesting chat. We got to do some, I really like when speakers are willing to go a little off the cuff and we get to see what they're passionate and excited about. And I think Nate really took us on a bit of a journey today through all the ins and outs of tax. Who knew tax could be so fun? On that note, also a big high five and thank you to all of you for attending, for asking some great questions, participating in the chat. And I hope that you're feeling like you've gotten some ideas for some of those solutions and systems that could work in your organization, regardless of size or industry, and how you could kind of reach that efficiency goal with data management that you've been thinking about, how that could help connect your team, maybe open up some space for folks in your team to take on new roles or skills that are really going to supercharge your entire organization, enable that scalability that you've been dreaming about, and create that unique and personalized experience for your customers. So the opportunities here are really exciting, and I'm hoping that you're all feeling really pumped up about that. Well, I look forward to seeing you all at a webinar again soon, and until then, have an absolutely beautiful end to your day. Thanks all.